Hi there, this is Athena from the Seedling Stitch. I am kind of a veteran knitter of Japanese patterns and have made quite a few podcast episodes and tutorials on Japanese knitting on my channel. And recently, I found that my videos on Japanese knitting have gained more attention, and that's probably because a few popular knitting podcasters started knitting Japanese patterns themselves and have influenced more people to attempt knitting Japanese patterns. And I guess some of you might have found my channel through my Japanese knitting mini lesson series when searching for this kind of tutorial. Well, my Japanese knitting mini lesson series have guided you through a whole Japanese pattern from end to finish systematically. However, it is limited in that it cannot answer some of the specific questions you may encounter for your own Japanese patterns. So in this video, I'd like to give you some more general tips for using Japanese patterns, like the translation, the grading, and some important resources, so that you can feel more confident diving deeper into the fantastic world of Japanese knitting. My first tip is on how to find the Japanese knitting patterns. Well, in my previous mini lesson series, I have showed you how to find free individual Japanese knitting patterns from their Piho Yarn website catalog. However, as we all know that when something is free, there is a trade-off. And in this case, these patterns are specifically designed for their own yarn, and it might be hard for you to understand some specific symbols and schematics from those patterns. Well, in most cases, for Japanese patterns, they are usually published in the format of a magazine or a book. And for these collections of knitting patterns, you can usually buy them from Etsy. And there is a Japanese Etsy shop that I would recommend. The seller is called Pomodoro24. It is not affiliated. I just personally have bought some Japanese books from this seller, and I found the price was good and the shipping was fast. They also carry quite a large range of Japanese, not just knitting, it's Japanese crafting books. You can look through their category. They have the knitting and crochet category. They also have sewing, origami, paper crafts, all sorts of crafting books if you're interested in other crafts as well. But just for the knitting books, they do carry a large range, and it's also quite up to date. I found that usually when there are new knitting books published, you can almost find them on this Etsy shop immediately after the publication. So it's a really good shop, and I'll put all the link in the description box below as well. And in some other cases, the pattern only comes with a kit. For example, this sweater that I am wearing today, it is the wall garden pullover designed by Erika Tokai, and the pattern only comes with the kit with the yarn. So in my case, the yarn brand is Puppy Yarn, and this website, they do have an English version, and you can also purchase their yarn or kits using PayPal. So as someone who lives in Vancouver, Canada, I had no problem using their website to order the whole kit from Japan. And I will put the link to all the other kits they carry in the description, and you can find quite a variety of knitting patterns and kits on their website. And I found it's actually quite a good deal. The designer, Erika Tokai, she's very good at designing color work items, and in her designs, you might need up to 20 different yarn colors. And in that case, even if you got the pattern individually, it will be very hard to find all the matching colors of this yarn. So it's nice that you get the kit and they can pack the correct amount of each yarn colors for the project. Apart from that, you could also follow some of the Japanese knitting related Instagram accounts so that you can always learn the most up-to-date design information from these crafting book publishers or yarn brands or designers. I will just list a few that I personally follow, and you can see if there's anything you like. For example, I follow the Keito Dama, and they are a quarterly Japanese knitting and crocheting magazine. You can consider them as the Japanese version of the Lane magazine. And I also follow Books Banka. This is a publishing house of crafting books, and they do not only knitting but also sewing and other crafts, and you can check them out too. I also follow the Puppy Yarn Official, and this is a popular Japanese yarn brand that carries some kids and interesting yarn by themselves. There's also the Rowan Yarns Japan. Rowan Yarn, as you may know, is from England, but they are also quite popular in Japan. And they also collaborate with some famous Japanese designers, and you can see how the Japanese designers use the Rowan yarn to design something unique with their own cultural backgrounds. There are also a few designers I like. I follow Erika Tokai, as you know, the designer of the wall garden pullover that I'm wearing now. And I follow Mariko Mikuni. This account is not from the designer herself, but it's from the brand that she started, and she made a few designs in kits, and you can find the latest information from this account. There's also a designer called Sanae Nasu, and her account is Notebook Green Place, and she had quite some unique designs, and I highly recommend her accounts as well. Well, if you are interested in crocheting, you could follow Beyond the Riff. They are a designer team who specializes in crocheted bags. And then A Little Line. She is also a designer in crocheting, mostly bags, but she also does other crochet items. And while following these accounts, you can look through the recommended accounts from Instagram, see if there are other accounts that you like, and these will help you get a deeper contact with the Japanese knitting world. And I think the important thing of doing all of these is that you need to find a pattern that you really like you want to knit it no matter what. And this passion will get you through all the challenges you might encounter when knitting, like the translation or the symbols. But if you have passion for this pattern, I'm sure that you will be able to work all these out and succeed in knitting the pattern of your dream. My second tip is that it's very helpful to use the Google Translate app, specifically the camera function. Although most Japanese patterns include mostly the schematics and diagrams, there are still a few words scattered here and there, or a few sentences of instructions that is essential for you to understand the whole workflow of the pattern. And each pattern may have different instructions, so that even if you watch my mini lesson series, it might not be helpful for you to understand your own pattern. And in this case, you can use the Google Translate app. There is a camera function, and when you click the camera button, you can just point your phone camera to the pattern, no matter it's on a book, on paper, or a PDF on your iPad. The app will automatically patch that section of the Japanese words and translate that into English or whatever language that you speak. And even sometimes the translation is not accurate, but with your knitting experiences and some guesswork, you can probably work out what it means. And if Google Translate is not available in your region, you can also seek the translation app from your region. There's usually this kind of camera function in the translation apps nowadays. Tip 3. So now you want to knit Japanese patterns, but it's still quite overwhelming to just look at a pattern that's in a language that you don't understand at all. But the good news is that there are a few knitting books that includes the English instructions, so that you can actually look at the Japanese pattern and the English instructions side by side, and you can use these as examples to try to understand the English pattern first, and then look back at the Japanese schematics and diagrams. And at this point, it will help you integrate the knowledge from both languages, and that perhaps can help you understand the Japanese patterns better. And the first pattern book with English instructions I want to recommend is from Miknits, The Best of Miknits. There are 2 books in this series, one book for small accessories and the other is full garment or clothes. And I have personally used the small accessory collection to learn about using Japanese patterns by myself. I knitted quite a few designs from the book, including this Niigata scarf. And the designs in these books are quite lovely, and it was very helpful for me to look side by side to understand how the Japanese pattern works. And there's another book, the Let's Knit in English by Tomoko Nishimura. This book is actually written for Japanese knitters who want to use English patterns, but you can totally reverse engineer the book to learn how to use Japanese patterns as an English pattern knitter. So this book includes a few designs that have both the Japanese patterns and the English patterns, and that includes both knitting and crochet. And the best part of the book is that on the end, it has a knit and crochet dictionary, and this includes the terminologies in English as well as in Japanese for like the measurements of different body parts or the garment parts, and a conversion chart for the knitting needle and crochet hooks, as you know that the Japanese needle size is differently numbered as the American sizes, and also the yarn weight. And at last, there is a dictionary for different stitches, and these includes the symbols and the Japanese words, the English words, and the English abbreviations. And I have found that this chart was quite handy. Well, the book I have here is the Chinese translation of the original Japanese book, so I have a bonus of the translation in Chinese as well. By the way, if you speak any other East Asian languages like Chinese or Korean, there is a high chance that all these Japanese pattern books might have a translation in Chinese or Korean. So you can search in your local book dealer to see if they have a translation of the Japanese knitting book that you're interested in. So tip number 4 is mostly for Japanese pattern books. Usually, if you buy a book or a magazine of knitting or crochet patterns, they would have a section at the last few pages that shows you some basic techniques that are used in this book. For example, I'm showing you the Colorwork knitting book by Tokai Erika. And in the last few pages, it shows you how to read the Japanese knitting schematics with the examples to convert a schematic to a chart. And it also shows you how to do the long tail cast on, how to do the provisional cast on with the crochet chain, and it also teaches you what these Japanese knitting symbol means. And these are usually very well graphed, so even if you don't understand the written instruction, you will still have a good idea of how this stitch works just by looking at these pictures. And it also shows you how to do some of the stitch works, like the mattress stitch or the Kitchener stitch, and how to do the Japanese short rolls. And since there are some crochet projects as well, there's even some basic instructions for doing the basic crochet stitches. So when you are buying a Japanese knitting book, don't be overwhelmed by the very concise schematics in the middle of the book. You can probably go to the last few pages to learn some of the basic techniques. My tip number 5 is on grading. So if you have tried a few Japanese patterns, you might have found that they don't have that many sizes. Sometimes there's only one size, or at most up to 3. And I think it's not because that they don't care about size inclusiveness, it's just because the Japanese knitters, they are quite advanced, and they are usually expected to know how to do the gradings by themselves. Like, they even have this whole book of adjustments or changing sizes for your knitting and crochet projects. Well, like this book showed, there are some more mathematical ways to do the grading, but today in this tip, I'm just gonna introduce the most basic way. That's by changing the gauge. So the general rule is that if you find the garment too small and want to make it bigger, you go up your needle size. And if you want to make the garment smaller, you go down by 1 or 2 needle sizes. And to see how much bigger or smaller the new gauge gets you, we need to do a few simple calculations. So let's say that your current garment has a bust of 100 centimeter. And the gauge is 20 stitches per 10 centimeters. And you want to make it bigger by changing up your needle size. And after changing the needle size, your gauge became 18 stitches per 10 centimeter. So the expansion rate will become 20 over 18, that is 1.11. So that means after the changing of the gauge, the bust circumference will become 100 centimeter times 1.11. That will be 111 centimeters. So let's see another case. If you want your garment to be smaller, you will need to use a smaller needle size. And after changing the needle size, your new gauge become 22 stitches per 10 centimeters. That means the shrink rate will be 20 over 22, and that is about 0.91. So that means after the changing of the gauge, the bust circumference will become smaller, and that is 100 centimeter times 0.91, and the new bust circumference will be 91 centimeters. However, just bear in mind that this method will not work if the change of your gauge is too big. Like if you go up by 3 or 4 needle sizes, you might also need to take account the change in the roll gauge as well. But that is kind of beyond the scope of this short video, so let's talk about that in another day. At the end, I just want to tell you some resources and services about Japanese knitting that I offer myself. The first one is that I have made this Japanese knitting bookmark for yarn weight and needle sizes that you can download as a free PDF on my Ko-fi page, ko-fi.com/seedlingstitch. And I have also made a spreadsheet for Japanese knitting symbols and terminologies that you can use to help you understand their charts and their schematics. And if after trying out all these tips and resources, you still have questions on some specific parts on your Japanese patterns, I do offer private translation service that you can request from the commission tab of my Ko-fi page. So that's all my tips for using Japanese patterns. I hope these have been helpful for you. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out future Japanese knitting contents or tips, and also give me a thumbs up so that my video can reach out to more knitters and pass the joy of knitting Japanese patterns to more knitters around the world. Thank you for watching a Seedling Stitch episode. Happy knitting! I'll see you next time. Bye!